Hi guys, welcome. Welcome everyone. Let me quickly check the messages here in chat. Can you do it with watered down acrylic paint? Yes, you can. You may get a slightly different result because watered down acrylic paint still has a different consistency than watercolor, but absolutely, you absolutely can. Oh, hi. Yes, Happy New Year, guys. So we're going to wait a couple more minutes. We'll wait maybe 2 more minutes just to make sure we're not missing anyone. And then we're going to start. So in the meantime, just make sure you have everything that we need for today. And what we're going to need is pencil. Make sure you have a pencil and eraser, tape, watercolor of some kind or acrylic. Again, you're welcome to use watered down acrylic. And of course, a couple different brushes, water, paper towel, paper, all those things. So again, we'll give everyone maybe 2 more minutes to join us and then we'll start. Yes, you can paint the edge, absolutely. Sometimes what I do when I don't have tape for the edge, so for this one, I'm going to be using tape for 2 reasons. Reason number one, because as you can see, this is a full coverage painting, right? So we're going to be watering down the entire thing. So reason number one is to hold it, so just it doesn't wobble too much. It's just a little bit easier that way for you to personally to work with your paper, so it doesn't get too, wavy. But for just the look purposes, instead of using tape, you can just grab a ruler and a, pencil and just make lines, right? Outline your edge and just try not to get on it. And then if you do, you can always fix it again with white acrylic or whatever. But yeah, I've done this many times too when I didn't have tape and I wanted to visually have the look of the edge, is just to use the ruler and, pencil and make the edge. But also another option number 3 that you could do if you wanted to have a white edge in the end is you just paint as is. You don't bother, or you do outline of an edge, but you still go over it, right? You don't really follow it too much. And then once we're done, you take razor blade and you cut it by the edge. And then you glue this on a separate white piece of paper. So that will give you the exact same look. It's just going to be a little bit thicker. So yeah, that's an option too. Or the other way around, you can grab another piece of paper. Actually, this is what I did in college, by the way. This is what we've done in college to frame our paintings before our shows. We would paint a painting on a whole sheet, and then we'll take a separate piece of paper, cut out a hole here, throw it out to create the frame, and then we'll lay this frame over and we will glue it on. So then this one ends up underneath and the frame ends up on top. So it kind of looks framed in a way too. I would say this is the best looking option if you don't have tape and you want to have that edge in the end and you want it to also look framed. I still do it every now and then, but yeah, that's a good way to go about it as well. To answer your question in regard to acrylic, very watered down, very, very, very watered down. So as we go, I'll be showing you how watered down my watercolor is, just the same way you're going to do your acrylic. So it's going to be the same level of watered down as I'm going to be using here. And for different spots, it's different. So for example, for here and here, it's going to be almost straight, not watered down. And for here and here, it's going to be really watered down. So it varies throughout the painting. So I'll show you as we get there. Now, can you do this on a canvas, guys? You absolutely can try. This technique is not made up for a canvas. It's made more for a paper because paper has slightly different qualities for absorbing the paint. So you may, again, get different results if you do it on a canvas. It's not doable. It totally is doable. I don't want to discourage you from doing it. Just keep in mind there will be minor differences. Because again, how absorbent this is, so it's going to slightly have different effect on the canvas because canvas is not as absorbent as paper. And also drying times. Drying times for me are going to be way less than drying times for you if you do it on a canvas. So just keep that differences in mind. Other than that, absolutely, go for it. All right, so welcome, guys. I think we can start now. My name is Vera, if we haven't met before. I'll be your instructor for today, and this is what we're going to paint. Now, what we're going to need, I'm using just a regular 9 by 12 inch watercolor paper, nothing special. I'm going to put that aside. And tape. And I'm going to start by actually taping my piece of paper. I'll tape it somewhere here. That looks like a good spot to tape it. All right. Again, for those of you who are not taping, that's okay too, guys. It's not super necessary. I just find that with full coverage paintings like that, when there's the entire paper covered, not just something in the middle, when the whole background is painted, I find that it's easier to work when you tape it because then your paper doesn't move and doesn't wrinkle as much. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to go about it. And guys, for those of you who are joining us for the first time and maybe you're not familiar with how the YouTube live format works, you can rewatch this video anytime. It's going to stay right here. It's not going anywhere. So if you have to go somewhere, you can stay the entire event. You can come back anytime and finish it later on as well. It doesn't have to be done right now. And also, even as we're live, you can just rewind this video and rewatch certain sections of it. But once it's done, once the event is done, the video is going to stay on YouTube, and then you're going to be able to pause the video as well, which is a good option. And I know a lot of people enjoy that. So keep that in mind. All right, so I taped my paper. What else are we going to need? Of course, water. We're going to need a paper towel or reusable fabric cloth, whatever you got there. We're going to need a couple different brushes. It's always good to have 3. It's like a golden standard. So this one is the large pointy brush, medium pointy brush, and a small pointy brush. For watercolor, I always recommend using pointy brushes. Generally, they are the best, and a soft bristle, natural or synthetic, but soft bristles are the best for the watercolor. So it's like opposite of acrylic. For acrylic, I like to use square synthetic, so stiffer brushes. For watercolor, soft, pointy brushes. But the most important here, you don't have to have those specific brushes. The most important is that you need to have a good small brush for all the details because there are lots of details here, and something bigger for the background. So you can get away technically with 2 brushes. And for paint, I'm going to be using my watercolor palette here. This is a koi watercolor, but you're welcome to use absolutely any. If you have, let's say, 6-color Crayola, you can still do this. It's still going to work well for you. Or watered down acrylic, doesn't matter, whatever you guys got. So this is what I have here. And because you can't really see the colors here, and they don't make much sense, I'm going to be showing you colors on this paper where they do make more sense. And any color that's not standard, I'm going to show you how to mix that color out of more standard colors. So you can, you know, work with whatever you have. But I'll put that aside because we're going to start with a sketch, so we don't need this right away. And of course, pencil. We're going to need a pencil because that's what we're going to start with. I have a pencil right here. And we're going to start by deciding where the horizon line is going to be on this painting. I would say I want a horizon line somewhere here. So I'm just going to add one straight or somewhat straight line around here. That's my horizon line. Do watercolor supplies get old? No, I don't think so. I have watercolors from, they do dry up, but you can still use them. I have watercolors from over 10 years ago, and they're still in a good shape. They dried up, but you can still use them. The pigment is still there. So no, I don't think so. But maybe, I don't know. I guess it depends on a brand. But generally, I would say they last forever. All right, so we have horizon line. Now I'm going to add this road. So I'm going to add two lines. One coming from this corner here and wrapping around and going really close to that horizon line, but not touching it. So something like that. And then second one from right here. So from this point, and it's going to wrap here and get there. I generally try to keep those lines light, and the reason why is, as you can see, this is a very light painting. It doesn't have much of a dark colors. It has dark tree trunks, it has dark cabin, it has dark forest there, but all those snowy sections and the sky are very, very light. So you don't want to see the harsh pencil lines through your painting later on. To answer your questions, A4 absolutely works. Yes, this is similar to A4. Is A4 cardstock? It can be. A4 is just the size. You can buy it in cardstock, you can buy it not in cardstock. Cardstock is more of a thickness of a paper. All right, so now we're going to sketch our little cabin right here. So we're going to start by just putting a rectangle somewhere in this area. And then we're going to add the roof. So it's like a triangle, but a little bit sticking out on the sides. Do you see I'm bringing it a little bit further on the sides? And I'm going to add this a little line on a rooftop. Chimney. And door somewhere in the middle, and two windows. Just the window openings. You don't have to sketch much in there. You don't have to sketch all the details unless you really want to, but I personally wouldn't do that. I just want to sketch the openings to know where to position the lighter colors, where to position darker colors, and the rest I will work as I go. What else? I wouldn't be sketching my trees at all. I mean, those little guys in the background, I'm not going to be sketching those, but I will position the trees right here. So I'm going to position only 2 trees. I'm going to position this big 2, and the small ones, I'll fill them in the end. So you don't have to do that. So I'm going to start by putting 1 line somewhere around here. This is going to be my first tree. And I'm only positioning tree trunk. Again, I'm not positioning the branches either. So just 1 line for the left side of a tree trunk. It doesn't even have to be straight. And then second line for the right side of tree trunk. Just make sure your tree is a little thinner on top, and then it should gradually get wider as you go down. So something like this. Do you see? It's thinner on top, and it gradually gets wider as you go down. That's our tree number 1. It doesn't have to be straight again. It can be. It can be just a little bended one way or another, or it can be really a little wavy, whatever you want. And then I'm going to position second tree right here, so somewhere right here. And it's going to start lower as well. The same deal, I'm going to start by positioning one side of the tree. And then I'll position second side of the tree. All right, so I have my 2 trees positioned. I am not going to be sketching anything else. That's pretty much all that I want to sketch. So once you guys have that, you can put away your pencils, you can put away your erasers, and then we're going to move to our actual painting part. Yeah, guys, you can use watercolor pencils for sketching, absolutely. I don't. I like my regular HB pencil. And sometimes, well, there are many reasons why I don't use watercolor pencils for sketching, but the main 2, A, I don't find it necessary, and B, I want my lines to stay. I don't want them to get washed off once the water hits them. If that doesn't bother you and you're okay to lose your lines once the water hits them, you can use water soluble anything. But I find that I want my lines where I want my lines, no matter how many layers of water I go over them. So for me, HB pencil, very, very lightly is the best option. And I would probably recommend that over the watercolor pencils. However, if watercolor pencil is all you have, absolutely, go for it. I don't want to discourage you from doing that either. All right, so we're going to start working on our background. We're going to start working on our sky, and we're going to start working on our snow here, snowy road. So I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm going to start with the biggest brush that I have. So I'm going to grab my big brush, I'm going to dip it in the water, and I'm going to water down the entire sky. Don't avoid your trees, don't avoid your house. Go right over it. Those are going to be very light colors, so yeah, if you get them on a trees or on a house, it's not a big deal. We'll cover them up later once the time comes with whatever they need to be covered with. And I'm making it quite wet, guys. Not just a little bit of water, lots of water. And you're going to do this regardless whether you're using watered down acrylic or watercolor. Either way, you're going to water it down and water it down well, really well. I mean, if you're using canvas, you might want to go a little less than if you're using paper, again, because it's a little less absorbent. Paper will eat up this water. It will drink up this water really fast and it's going to dry. Canvas, not so much. So you still will need to water it down, just maybe not as much water. The water is for the technique that we're going to be using here. So now we're going to start adding our colors. I like working my way from the top down, but it doesn't matter at all. So from the top, I'm going to start with something blue. So maybe something like that, something light blue. If you only have one light blue, not a problem. If you generally just have one blue and it's dark, not a problem at all. Just take a watered down version of it, make it lighter, and we'll go from there. And let me quickly make some space on my palette here. All right. So the color I want to start with, yeah, it's going to be something like that. Or even something like that. It's just something lighter blue. And this is how watered down you want it, regardless of whether you're using watercolor or acrylic. You see, it's just like a dirty water. And we're going to start applying this dirty water somewhere around here. Now the top will have to be done somewhat fast because it's going to need to be done on wet. That's just the technique we're going with here. So add it up. In certain areas, you can add it a little more saturated. So by saturated, I mean more pigment, less water. So do you see it has a bit more color? Just add it in and let it spread. Let it spread naturally. Don't really do anything with it. That's why we added so much water, so it just spreads. So it does its thing. Okay, so this is a good start. Now right away, I'm going to continue going down with more water down of the same color, but not too far. So we'll go here. Now I'm going to move to my next color. And my next color is going to be darker blue. So I'm going to take something like this, quite dark. If you don't have those particular colors, that's okay. You can just grab the darkest blue out of what you have. And if, let's say, the darkest blue out of what you have is maybe something like that, so it's not enough darkness, you can add a tiniest smidge of black. Just don't overdo this because it's going to get very dim if you add too much black. So just try to only add a tiny touch of black if needed. If not needed, don't add it at all. And here, now I'm going to add a couple spots. So this one, and this one, this one, and this one. I'm going to add in this color. And again, I'm going to let them, you see, I'm almost dabbing them on because my paper is still super wet. The paint that I'm adding is nice and liquid. So they are naturally going to start spreading. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. And if they don't, I can manually help them out spread. And I'll show you how in a second. So just dab it up a bit where it belongs. All right. And what I'm going to do, because this is drying too fast, I'm going to wash my brush and I'm going to wet it again to make sure it stays wet because I need to continue working down. And I want my paper there to be nice and wet. And for those, do you see how mine spread naturally the way I want it? But if it doesn't, what do? Is you take your brush, you dip it in the water, then you dab off too much water on a paper towel so you don't have like a pools of water as you go in. And with a clean, slightly wet brush, you go over the edge of those sections that you added, and you kind of smudge them with water. And it really helps it to spread a little. And that's only needed if your paint was a little too dry and it didn't naturally spread, then you're going to do it. If it naturally did spread, don't touch it. You don't need to do this. And after that, again, while everything is still wet, I'm going to move to my purple. That would be my next color. Any purple that you have, you can use. If you don't have any purple, to make purple, you're gonna grab pink and you're gonna grab blue and you're gonna mix them up. Or red if you don't have pink. But pink is a better choice. So pink and blue, majority pink, a little bit of blue will give you purple. But usually every watercolor set has somewhat of a purple, even the smallest watercolor set. And a couple areas where we're gonna add it. I'm gonna start by adding some on top. And you see this didn't spread, and I'll show you how to spread it in a second. Now I'm gonna dab some right here on the bottom of this, on the bottom of this one too. And again, notice how nice and transparent that is. It's almost like a watered down, just like a dirty purple water. Okay, now let's spread this guy. So I washed off my brush, I dabbed it off on a paper towel, and with a clean wet brush, I'm just gonna go over this. You see, I can manually spread this into the nearby colors. And then I'm gonna go lower with my purple. I'll add some around here. And I'll add some around here. And then my next color that I'm gonna add is gonna be something on a yellowy side. So as you can see, I have tons of yellows available to choose from. I would say something yellowy orange or this color. I personally want to use this color, but any of those will work. So if you don't have this one, it's like a sand color. It doesn't come with all watercolor standard. It's not a standard color. It's more of a fancy color. So if you have it, and you may, grab it. If not, the easier option is one of the lighter yellowy oranges. They will work just as well. If you don't have either, it's easy to mix. To mix one of those colors, you start with yellow. You grab a ginormous amount of yellow and a tiny touch of red or orange. You mix it in, it will bring you right here. To mix this color to this, you add a tiny touch of brown. It will bring you right here. So either this or that, you're gonna grab, or even a mixture of all that. And you're gonna go right here. And you're gonna add that all to the mix on wet. And you see again, I'm using super transparent. This is like a dirty water. That's all it is. And I am using a ton of water here because I want it all to spread and to blend and do its own thing. And I don't want to control it too much. I want to allow it to do what it does. And in certain areas, you can get it more saturated and you can just add a bit more color. In other areas, you can have it a bit more watered down. It's good to have a variety. You don't want to have it one color solid everywhere. And then the last color that I want to add on wet on the top is the blue again. So again, I'm going to go to the dark blue that we used. So something like that. And guys, I promise I'll give you some time to finish all this up. I have to do this all on a wet, but I will give you a bit more time. And we're going to add it right here. So again, any color that you want, as long as it's in a darker blue color scheme, that's the color you're going to be using. So I'll add it right here. And I might even add a touch more right here and right here. And again, if it didn't blend right away, you can always help it by adding some water around the edge of your brush strokes, that area that you added paint to. All right, so my first layer on top is done. I will still do second layer, but this is just my first layer. I'll give you guys a couple minutes for this, and then we'll move to our bottom. We'll work on our bottom for a little bit, and then we'll go on the top and we'll do second layer on top. But yeah, I want to make sure you guys are all caught up and no one is falling behind. And I know it's a trick, especially if this is your maybe first or second time doing watercolor. It's a little trickier. With acrylic, you don't always have to go this fast because acrylic techniques are different. With watercolor techniques, to achieve that, watery look of everything blending into everything, you kind of have to do it fast at times. Once you do a layer, you can always have a dry time before next layer. But yeah, when you do the first coverage, you kind of have to work speedy. But yeah, I'll give you a couple minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in chat. And when you have it, feel free to give me thumbs up, say I'm good to go, and then we'll move to our next step. All right, I see a couple thumbs ups. That's good. That's a good start. Wait a couple more minutes. Robin, yes. Yes, just waiting for everyone to catch up. All right, I see a couple more readies, which is great. Lots of readies, wonderful. Okay, let's move to our bottom then. So as before, we're gonna start by watering down. This time you don't need to use as much water, but it still has to be wet. We're gonna start on wet. All right, I water down my bottom. So now I'm going to start with the same yellowy orange color that I just used for the top. So I'm going to take a bit of that and I'm going to add it right on this edge so it spreads down a little. Because do you see here it has that almost reflection of sky on our snow. So a bit of that. Make sure it spreads a little bit down. So if it doesn't spread manually, sorry, it doesn't spread automatically, you can spread it manually a little bit with just water and brush, but it doesn't have to be gradient. We just need a smidge of it there. Then after that, we're gonna add a bit more of this color in a different area. So somewhere right here, just a couple of brush strokes, very lightly. We're not aiming to have it dark there. We just wanna have a little bit of it. And this one, if it doesn't spread, don't spread it because we're trying to imitate the tire tracks, like as have been some cars were driving in there. So if it's a little more linear, that's okay. A little bit here too. Again, just a reflection. Snow, it's not a snow with a P on. That's not why it's yellow. It's the snow that reflects our sky. That's why all those colors are going to be on it. And also the only other colors that we're going to add on it is the brown. And again, that's more for just, tire tracks. Rachel, great question. So to answer your question, from what I understand, your issue is that your paper just keeps getting too wavy and then your water pools into, those lower spots. So two things about that. A, probably not the best paper for watercolor. The thicker your paper is, the less it's going to do this wavy things. So with a thinner paper, it always will do it. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to prevent that. So I would say in the future, just if you're planning to continue using watercolor, buy a little thicker paper. But for now, what you could do, in those pools of water, just take a corner of a paper towel and just soak it in. So just dab up that extra water in those lower sections. That's what I do. I don't always use the best paper. This is the paper that I'm using right now. It's definitely not the best paper, but it's suitable. It's thick enough for the watercolor. But sometimes if I have an urge and I don't have the appropriate watercolor paper, I'll use regular paper and it will do that thing every single time. So just continue dabbing with a corner of your paper towel, the water that pooling in on a lower sections. But generally, yeah, try to use different paper next time. All right, now let's add a bit of blue and a bit of purple before this dries. And you can use large brush or medium brush or small brush for this, doesn't matter. I'll stick with my large one for now. I might even water it down a little more because I feel like it's drying too fast. So maybe I'll just add even a little more water here before moving to next step. Just to keep it fresh and wet. All right, and now I'm gonna go with some blue. Doesn't really matter which blue. I would say still try to stay with a darker blue, but more watered down. So don't use light blue that's supposed to be light because we're not looking for this bright, neon-y, almost like teal color. We're looking for muted. And muted blue you only get if you use dark blue originally. So grab something like that or something like that, something on a darker side, and just use that with a lot of water. And we'll add a couple lines here. All right. So do you see, I added the first underlay. Now I'm going to go a little bit more saturated with my color. And I'll just add a little bit more. Then I'm going to move to purple. And I'll add a bit of purple here. You see, very light as well. I'm using almost just dirty purple water. A little purple here. A little purple here. And I'll add purple as a not as a reflection, as a shadow from our trees. So I'll add just this two for now, and then the rest I'll add much later. So that's good for now. The only other color, I might add a little bit more darker blue on the second layer, and I might add a bit more brown here on the second layer, but I'm not going to be doing it now. I'm going to let that dry because that's all we needed to do on wet there. And another thing that I want to do on wet now is I want to add this row of trees right here. So for that, I'm actually going to start by watering it down again. So this section, I'm just going to water that down again. In my case, by the way, my top is dry. If your top is not dry yet, I would say just wait. Take a little break and do it whenever it's dry. Especially if you're using canvas, your top might still be really wet. In which case, if you add water now, it's just going to wash off all the paints you had there. So it's not going to work. You're going to need to wait until it dries for you to do the next step. For those of us who are using paper, it likely is dry. For me, it is dry. It doesn't have to be super dry, but dry to touch. So if you touch it, you see nothing comes out. So that's what you want. So then you're going to water down the top and just like a little smidge on the bottom. And we're going to start adding our colors for this row of trees. And the first color I'm going to add is going to be my green. So you're going to grab any green that you want. Just make sure it's dark green. In my case, I have this beautiful green that I love. It's a very, very dark green. It's like a dark emerald, but it doesn't have to be that. Any dark green that you have will work. If you don't have any dark green, not a problem. What you can do to mix that color is grab any green that you have. Let's say you only have a standard green. Let's say that's the green you have. Let's say medium green, right? What you can do to bring it to this green is you add dark blue to it first. And then you add a smidge of black. So dark blue added to your green will bring you to here. And then if you add a smidge, the tiniest smidge of black, it's going to bring you right here. So that's what I'm going to be using. But again, any dark green will work. It doesn't have to be that particular shade. I'm going to switch my brush to medium here, actually. And you have to do this while this is still wet. So we can't really wait too long as well. I'm going to grab my dark green. And you see I'm using it quite saturated. And I'm going to start dabbing it on this line, and it will spread up and it will spread down, and that's okay. Now in this case, if you can avoid your little hut there, little cabin, avoid it. If some of it gets on a cabin, not a big deal. Totally fine, but don't intentionally go right over it. So do you see I did the first row of that green? And now I'm going to start kind of spreading it up a little. So just to imitate the trees, I'm going to add certain areas that go a little higher, certain areas that go a little lower. And again, all that on a wet. And once you've done that, you can actually, again, wash off your brush, dab off extra water on a paper towel, and go over just the tip of this, if needed, to kind of bring it a little bit further into the background and make it look like it's disappearing into the distance. Just work around it with water to help it spread a bit. Mostly on top. If you want to do that on the bottom a little, you can. But also, I mean, it's not really necessary. And you see, that's our first layer. Now, right away, we can add other colors here. So I'm going to add a little bit of this brownish color. So it's going to be, again, it's going to be like my orangey red mixed with brown. So if you're mixing, you're going to mix that orangey red, which is just, sorry, not orangey red, orangey yellow, which is just yellow mixed with a tiny, tiny touch of orange. And then to that, you're going to add brown. Any brown, whichever brown you have. And you're going to end up with just the right color. Do you see? It's like a brown, but it also has this yellowy undertone. And with that, I'm going to add it right above this section. So a little bit overlapping my green, but I'm going to spread it up as well. So my tree is going to end up multicolor. And again, right away, I'll wash off my brush and I'll just work around it. Blend two colors a little bit in between if needed. And then I'm even going to grab some blue. So just any blue. I would still say on the darker side is probably best. Grab a little bit of that blue. And I will add it just in here, right in the middle of my green. So it spreads. You may not see it very well on camera because it's so dark, it almost looks like black. But in real life, you can see this beautiful blue tone going right through the middle of that dark green. So I'll just dab it a touch right here. And you will see it more once it dries too, because watercolor paper does get a little lighter as it dries. Sorry, not watercolor paper, watercolor paint. It does get a little lighter as it dries. So you're going to start seeing more of that as that's going to start drying. And maybe I'll add a touch more orangey yellow underneath here. Just like a little smidge. All right, now it's first layer on our trees. We're going to add actual trees that look like trees. Let me zoom in here. You see there are a couple spots that have trees that actually look like trees, but we're going to add it on the next layer. We just added this really wishy-washy first layer. That's beautiful, but it has to dry now. So again, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes and then we're going to go second layer on top and second layer on the bottom. And again, whenever you guys have it, give me a thumbs up. And then we'll move to our next step. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in chat. And I see a lot of suggestions there in chat for watercolor paper. Yeah, you're right. Like the one that I'm using right now is 140 as well, as you can see here. But again, it's not the best, I would say, watercolor paper. It works. It's a watercolor paper that will work well. But again, I wouldn't consider this still a professional grade watercolor paper. This still is a student grade watercolor paper. Professional is thicker than that. And the professional watercolor paper doesn't wave at all. It has a very minimum waviness. This one, as you can see, it's not too bad. I soaked it so many times. It only got slight waviness. So again, it's very, like 140 is a comfortable paper. If you don't want to struggle with, having constant waves. Any smaller number will give you a higher waviness, which again, it's workable. I had watercolor paper that I used out of necessity because I didn't have anything else at home and I needed to make something, or I wanted to make something. I use lower numbers watercolor paper too, and it will work. It's just a bit more work for you because it's going to wave a lot. But again, it's doable. Everything's doable. Oh, nice. To answer your question, if your sky feels dark, is there any way to lighten it up? I wouldn't bother. It's just a different, it's a bit more, it's dark outside. It's a different time of the day. Darker sky doesn't affect this painting, especially once we add our tree trunks and once we start adding snow here and this little steam or whatever that is coming out of the chimney and a little bit of falling snow, it may actually look really great with darker skies. So I wouldn't worry about it and I wouldn't light it up. If you wanted to light it up, you can, and you will have to use white acrylic. Watercolor is not meant to be, it's not like acrylic in a way that you can work from dark to light. You can only work from light to dark in watercolor. There's no way to lighten it up without using acrylic or other mediums. So technically you could just grab acrylic and wash it off in a couple spots, but I would just keep it. I think dark sky will work really well for you. Yeah, for the sky, acrylic white, for the snow, acrylic white will be perfect. I would definitely suggest acrylic versus watercolor white for the snow, just because acrylic is a little more solid than watercolor. Watercolor is going to be a little more transparent, but again, it's a personal preference. If you prefer that, you can, but I will be using white acrylic for the snow. Now to answer other question, how do we know who wins art kit? We're going to be announcing the winner tonight over the video on our Facebook page. So if you guys are looking forward to that, I can send you a link to our Facebook page if you don't have that yet. Yeah, and we're going to be announcing winner, I believe, at 6 today. I'm not sure yet. I think it's 6. And it's going to be over the video. So we'll do a Facebook Live video. And here is the link to our Facebook page. So if you still haven't participated in a contest to win the art kit, you can. You still have time. Yeah, and if you already have and you're just waiting to see the winner announced, wait a little bit longer. As far as brushes, the brushes that I'm using right now are not the best, to be honest with you, actually, as well. They're not bad. I got them off Amazon in the middle of a lockdown when nothing was open. So I don't remember the name of this, but if you look on Amazon, you will see them. They look exactly like this. They were not expensive. They were not crazy expensive. It was a set maybe for 20 bucks, but it's a full set. They're not bad overall. What I'm not a big fan of in this particular brush is this, which is easy fix. You can just glue them on, but they continue falling off. The brush itself is not bad. Don't know how long they will last me because I paint pretty much every day, but still, I think they were worth the money. All right. Now, let's move to our second layer on our top, on our sky. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a bit more darkness in the dark spots. Now, you don't have to do it. This is actually a very optional step in general. So if you feel like your sky is dark enough or contrast enough, or you just like your sky, don't touch it. Just hang out with me here for the next 10 minutes. Don't do a thing, let it dry up. If you feel like your sky could use a little bit more work or a little bit more paint or a little, just make it something more interesting, then you can do it now. And you're going to grab your medium brush, I would probably say the best, but any brush will work. Doesn't have to be specifically medium brush. And I'm going to start with my blue. I'm going to grab a little bit of a dark blue and let me show you what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to add a second layer to just darken it up and add more contrast in certain areas. I'll add blue and purple. So I'll start here. I'll add just a little bit of blue. Then I'll wash off my brush, dab it off on a paper towel again, and with a clean wet brush, go over that and smudge it. And this time it's not going to be fully blended. You will still see somewhat of a texture, and that's not bad. That is what we want, or at least that's what I want. You just don't want it to look like completely not merged. You want to merge it somewhat. Then I'm going to do it here too. Right here. Maybe a little bit here. Yes, gouache would work for white. And now I want to add a bit more purple, and that would be it for my second layer on top. Purple I will add in the exact same way. I'll start here, I'll add a bit more purple here, and a bit more purple underneath here. So adding it on, and then washing it off. Well, not in the middle, just around it in a way. So it spreads into the background. Maybe a little bit of purple here, and that's it. All right, I love my sky. I don't want to touch it anymore. So I'm done with it. Now I want to move to my bottom and I want to start working with my brown. So just grab any brown that you have. There's no need for a particular shade of brown for this. Whatever you have is good. And I'm going to start quite watered down here. And I'm going to use just the tip of my brush, or maybe if you prefer, you can use small brush for this, and we'll just add a couple lines. Maybe even more watered down than that. So do you see how a couple line there, a couple line here? So again, the imitating the tire marks here, just all small lines and all fairly light. And again, I'll give you guys a couple minutes to finish this up. And then we'll move to a darker brown and we'll add a bit of grass there, some plants. Then we'll move on to our trees on the background and our cabin and our trees right here. You're welcome. Yes, join whenever you can. The video is going to be right here. And guys, if this is your first time painting with us and you maybe just accidentally stumbled across our channel, welcome. We go live here, I would say once or twice a week currently. So feel free to subscribe to get notification when we go live. And also, we do have lots of tutorials already. We have different mediums. We have acrylic, we have watercolor, we have drawings. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check them out and see what piques your interest. And also, we do have Zoom events that we do pretty much every day. Well, almost every day. So if you're interested in that, you can check them out as well. I'll post a link to our website somewhere here in chat. And again, when you guys have it, give me a thumbs up so we can move to our next step. Yes, here's our website where you can see all Zoom events. And Zoom is good for those people who want to be able to have more on one-on-one communication and be able to show their painting in real life as we are on live event, because you'll be able to do that on Zoom. Where on YouTube Live, you can't really show your painting. But yeah, you can also check out everything that we have already scheduled to go on YouTube Live in January. We already have a full schedule for January. We have lots of beautiful paintings. So check them out to see what days work for you and which ones interest you. So you can mark them all in your calendars. All right, I see one ready. That's good. We'll wait a couple more minutes. You're welcome. All right, guys, I see lots of thumbs ups, which is great. So let's move on to our cabin for now. Let's work a little bit on our cabin. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start by coloring my windows. So you're just going to grab something yellowy orange again, or something on the warmer side. Orange will work, yellow will work. I like the yellowy orange. That's my personal preference here. You can mute it a little bit with brown if you feel like that's too much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to color that, but not just the window. I'm going to color a bit more than that. I wanted to color space around it as well. And I have a good reason for it. So you see, I colored way more than just the window itself. I colored a bit of a wall around it. And I'll show you later why. And then after that, we can move on to our trees. And I'm going to use brown. Again, whichever brown that you have, you're welcome to use it. And probably small brush would be the best. And you're going to use it quite saturated with not too much water. Yes, you still need to use some water, but not ginormous amounts of water. So just enough water. So this is the brown that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to start by, let me actually show you how to do trees here first. And I'm going to show you in a slightly larger brush and in a different color, just so we can see it better. So how I'm going to do a tree is I'm going to start by putting a tree trunk. And then from the top, I'm going to do this. You see little flicks towards the sides. From the top, they just have to be tiny, tiny, tiny. And then as you go lower, they need to get wider, wider, and wider. And you always, always flick from the inside out. So you don't do it the other way around. You always do it from the inside out. That's pretty much how you do your trees. All right, so I'm gonna grab this small brush, a little bit of my brown, And I'm going to start by positioning my tree trunk. So let's say I want to do one tree right here and one tree right here. So I position two of my tree trunks. Let me get even closer here. And now using this, the tip of my small brush, I'm going to start flicking from the top out. And on the top, it's just going to be very small. It's almost like dots. And then as you go lower, it's going to get a little wider and wider and wider. Overall, your tree needs to have this nice triangular shape. And the same with the second one. And make sure you don't use too much water, because if you use too much water, you're not going to be able to get that shape. It's going to start running in every direction. I mean, it's really hard to do generally fine details in watercolor when you use way too much water. Like if we use the amount of water we used for the background, you will never get that shape, just because it's going to run off in every direction too fast. So I did the trees. Now where the horizon line was, I kind of want to add it back a little bit. So I'm just going to add a couple of brush strokes around here to add that line back a little. Just a touch. And then I will add two more trees right here. So do you see my two large trees here? You can hardly see them, but I can still see my pencil. And that's exactly why I prefer HB pencil versus the watercolor pencil. So right here, I can still see them. So my two trees on the background are going to be a little bit left of that. So I can still see them as well. So they don't get covered up by my big trees. So we'll add a tree trunk, two tree trunks, one bigger, one smaller, and we'll turn them into trees. All right, and I want to do a couple smaller trees right here. So I'm just going to add a couple flicks from the bottom up, like a tree trunks in the distance. And then I'll add a couple branches out of them. Just to use the smallest brush that you have for this. And I would say the tip of your smallest brush. So they're nice and fine. All right, great. And again, I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. To answer your question, how to participate to win the prize, we are doing giveaway for art kit, acrylic art kit, by the way, not watercolor art kit, acrylic individual art kit, and original watercolor painting of your choice and original drawing of your choice on our Facebook page. So just go onto Facebook page, locate that post. It shouldn't be too far down. It should be somewhere within the last couple days. And just, yeah, scroll there. And there are all the rules there, how to participate in that post. But basically, you just have to comment to that post, I think. and say what exactly you would like to win and like our Facebook, something like that. So you will see it there if you're interested. To answer your other question, are we doing watercolor often? As far as teaching, I would say less than acrylic, but we do teach quite a few watercolor tutorials a month. I would say we teach about 1 to 2 free watercolor tutorials a month, and maybe 4 to 5 watercolor tutorials on Zoom as well. So if you're interested, you can again check out what we have scheduled for next month on our YouTube here to be taught free in the live format. And you can go to our website and check out what we have there for upcoming Zoom events. We do have all our schedules ready at least a month in advance. So you will see everything that's coming up in a month to month and a half. All right, guys, so now I'm going to move to our cabin. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add just 1 layer of brown on my cabin. By the way, I'm going to avoid this. Do you remember the thing we left here? Like a little line. I'm going to avoid that because I want to add different color in there. And the rest I'm just going to color in 1 layer. And the reason I added that yellow there, because as you can see it through. It gives it nice, beautiful, warm undertone. And the first layer, you don't want to go too dark. You want to go about medium brown, I would say. Maybe even light brown, because the second layer, that's where we're going to get dark, and that's where we're going to add more fine details. Oh, awesome. I'm glad you accidentally stumbled upon our video. That's perfect. All right, so we'll let that dry. As that's drying, I'm going to add this beautiful grass or whatever that is, some plants, some small plants there. And you're going to use a bit more saturated brown. And again, your small brush. And I'm going to start somewhere right here. So I'm going to add a bit more lines here, just on the edge. And then I'm going to add a bit more plants. So from the bottom up, I'll add a couple lines. Some of them are going to be straighter, some of them are going to be less straight. And then some of them will have branches coming out from them. So as you add a line, you can flick from the inside out a couple branches as well. Just remember, everything needs to be flicked from where it grows from. So if it grows from the ground, so you're gonna flick it from the bottom up. If it's a branch, you're gonna flick it from the main branch or the trunk out. So everything needs to be flicked from where it grows out. And the ones that are closer to you are gonna be a bit taller, because everything that's closer to us visually always looks bigger. And everything that's further will look smaller. And I'm going to add a couple simple ones on the other side. So see, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then just a couple dabs here on top for maybe some leaves that didn't really fall off. All right, we're getting there, guys. So after this, we're going to move to our cabin and we'll do second layer. But before we actually do that, we can do first layer on our trees, because our trees will also have two layers, just like a cabin. They'll have a first layer in, I would say, medium to medium light brown, and second layer in a very dark brown. So whenever you're ready, you can, I guess, move to your trees. You can use either medium or small brush for tree trunks. For the brush or branches, again, it's probably easiest to use small brush, because you're going to need fine lines. So first one, you're going to use, I would say, about medium brown, medium to medium light, so it's nice and transparent. You don't want it too dark on the first layer. I'm just going to cover our tree trunk with one layer of brown. I'll do it for this tree trunk, and I'll do it for this tree trunk as well. Oops. All right, I have two of my tree trunks, which is good. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add other smaller tree trunks. Do you see there are three more tree trunks there that are smaller? One in between those two trees and two on the right side. So the same thing, just make sure they're a little finer on top than they are on the bottom. That's the only thing. And generally they should be smaller than your two large tree trunks. If you can't fit that many tree trunks, that's okay. You can have way less. Or if you have lots more space left, you can have way more too. It's completely up to you. Okay, so I have oh my goodness, seriously? It just keeps falling. All my tree trunks in place. And now I want to move back to my cabin. And what I want to do with my cabin is I want to use slightly different color, the color we haven't used before. And it's going to be a mixture of red and brown. So I'm going to take some brown, put it here. And then I'm going to take some red. Doesn't matter which red, whichever red you have. And mix them up. You see it creates this darker reddish brown. And with this, I'm going to color in this section here. And the door. If you want, you can add a couple flicks vertically on the building itself, but not super necessary either. All right, guys, I'll give you another minute for this. And whenever you have it, give me thumbs up, just so I know that you're ready. And then we're gonna move to a bit more details on our cabin, tree trunks, again, second layer, and branches. And then all we have to do is finish it up with white. But I'll give you another minute here for this. See a couple thumbs ups, that's good. I'll give you guys another minute and then we'll move. All right, that looks good. So now we're gonna do pretty fine details on our cabin here. So you're gonna use the smallest brush that you have, and you're gonna use quite saturated brown. I'm gonna zoom in for this as well, so you guys can see better. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by adding a bit of a line right here underneath. A little bit on the bottom of a chimney. I'll add a line right here as well. And then I'm going to start adding vertical line going from the top down. And they don't have to be evenly spaced out. We'll add some window frames too. That's just going to give your building a bit more texture and make it more interesting. There we go. That's what you want to have. You can add a couple of random brush strokes too and darken it up in certain sections. It's just good to have a texture versus it being just one flat color. And then I'm going to move to my tree trunks. And I'm going to add with the same color a tree bark texture. So I'm going to be adding it on the right side of each tree trunk. So I'm going to be adding almost like a fine lines that form a tree bark texture. You see, I've mostly darkened up the right side, but you can add a couple flicks on the left side too, just on the edge if you want to. So overall, our right side stays darker. And I'm going to do that on every single tree trunk. So I'm going to start with my two bigger ones. And for my smaller ones, I'm not going to go as detailed and as much of it. I'll add a little smidge here and there, but I wouldn't go as crazy for them because they don't have to be the detailed. They're a little bit behind. And then I'm going to add branches. And branches, you can add as many as you want, anywhere you want. As you can see, my other tree has lots of branches. The only thing is, I would still say start with your two big tree trunks first, add branches from them, and only then, if needed, you can add a few branches as fillers from the back trees. You may not need them at all. It may be more than enough of branches just from the two big tree trunks. And with all branches, it's very important that you always start from the tree trunk and you work your way out. Don't do it from the outside in, always from the inside out. And push a little harder on your brush where you start to give it a bit of a wider brush stroke. And then as you go further, continue using just the tip of your brush. So push a little harder and then slowly let go as you go further. And that way your your branch will be thicker where you start and thinner on the end. And it's important to figure out what amount of water to use as well, because if you use not enough water, it's going to be a little bit hard to paint it. If you use too much water, if you use not enough water, it's going to dry up halfway through. You're not going to be able to finish this brush stroke. If you used a bit too much water, it's going to spread. It's going to get a little wider than you intend it to be. So it's about figuring out how much water to use, really. And that only you will know once you start trying. If first one turned out a little too thick, try using a little less water. If you felt like you were really scraping your paint and onto your paper and it wasn't really going and flowing, then maybe it wasn't enough water and you need to add a bit more. And make sure you add smaller branches out of that branch as well. And very important again, it's going to be the same technique. You start from the main branch and flick them out. And you push a little harder when you start and then you slowly let go using just the tip of your brush. That's where you want to use the best brush that you have is for branches. And also branches, I personally recommend doing them not straight. So do you see I'm trying to do them a little wavy so they have some sort of shape, so not just straight sticks. And also long. Do you see they're nice and long and flowy? You don't want to make them short and stabby because it will look like someone came with a saw or an axe and chopped them off. That's what it's going to look like if you make them short and stubby. That's why nice and long and flowy. So it looks like the trees are healthy, the branches are healthy. Jamie, to answer your question for the sketch, for pre-sketch for watercolor, I use just the most regular pencil, just HB pencil, nothing special about it. If you're referring to drawings that our artist Karen does, I would not be able to tell you. You're gonna need to ask her. She may be using a special pencils because, you know, it's different medium what she does. I only need it for a couple lines that I'm not going to see in the end, and she does it for actual visibility. All right, so I added some branches here, as you can see. And now I'm going to add a couple leaves. So just a couple dabs. All right, then that's pretty much it for my paint, watercolor paint. Now I'm going to grab acrylic. So I'm going to grab a bit of white acrylic paint and I will be back. Alrighty, guys. I have a bit of acrylic paint right here. So for this step, for our white, you can use either white acrylic, white ink, white watercolor, white gouache, whatever you have. Ideally, I would probably recommend something that is not too transparent. Watercolor white, some palettes have it, some palettes don't. Like my palette, for example, it does have watercolor white. I don't like using it very often. I actually hardly ever use it because it's very transparent and I don't get the point of having it on the first place. Maybe that's just my palette. Maybe some palettes have it less transparent and more solid. I prefer using acrylic white if ever I need white, which is not very often. In cases such as snow, for example, or glare, I would use acrylic white just because it's way more solid than watercolor white. But if watercolor white is all you have, you're still welcome to use it. Just make sure you use it very saturated as you can. But if you have alternative acrylic white or white ink or white gouache, that's a better options. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with my small brush and a little bit of acrylic white. I'm going to need to water it down just a little bit because my acrylic white is a little too solid. So I'm going to need to water it down. And then I'm going to start adding little icicles on top of our roof. All right, so a little dabs here. And then some icicles. Then I'm gonna add a bit of snow on my windows. On my door. And just a little bit right here, maybe. Then after that, I'll bring that smoke coming out from our chimney. And then I'm gonna add some on the trees. So do you see I'm adding a bit of snow on the left side of each tree? A lot of bit of snow on our leaves here too. And just a touch on our branches. Not even all of them. All right. So here they are. And one thing, and we're still gonna add snow, last thing, as a last thing, but I'm actually forgetting one little thing here, and that is shadow from our smaller trees. So do you see how we added shadow from our bigger trees, but we haven't added shadow from our smaller trees? So you're gonna use either your purple or your blue or the mixture of purple and blue, whichever you prefer. And I'm gonna add a bit more shadow from the big trees and a touch of shadow from the smaller trees too. And then after that, I'm going to do our last step, which is I'm going to splatter with white. So you're going to use the bigger brush for this. And you're going to water down your white. So make sure it's nice and liquid. You can't do splatter with a thick paint. So it needs to be nice and really watered down. And then you fill in the entire brush. So notice how I'm not using just the tip of the brush to gather the paint on. I'm using the entire brush. And the brush shape doesn't matter here. Square, pointy, rounded, whichever. Just make sure it's large and make sure it's covered in this watered down paint. And then I'm going to do this over the entire thing. And of course, refill is needed. And then to finish it up, I'm going to add a couple larger pieces of snow. So I'm just going to add some dots. So I will dip any rounded end of any brush. In my case, my small number 0 brush has a nice rounded end, but any brush will work as long as it has the rounded end, not painting side, the other side. If none of your brushes have that, then you're going to grab a painting side of a small brush and dip that in the water and dot with this, but this is a good option too. So you're going to dip it in white and you can add a couple larger dots anywhere you want, not too many of those, just a few. I'm adding them mostly on the sky, but I will add a couple in other areas too. Just don't overdo it with those. And those will represent the, snowflakes that are closer to us, because again, visually everything that's closer to us just looks bigger. So just a few of those. And ta-da, this is done. Now let's peel our tape and see how it looks. You can sign it, by the way, guys, here or on a frame, wherever you prefer. But I want to peel it first. All right, and here they are. Now we need to sign them. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you can sign it within a frame or on a frame, whatever you prefer. I usually, if it's just initials, I would sign on a painting, but if I want to put my entire name and last name, I would put probably on a frame. Doesn't matter though, wherever feels comfortable. And if you do a lot of painting and you're planning to continue doing this for a while, for the next couple of years, I would highly recommend that you sign it on a back with, let's say, well, this one has a tree. Let's do this one. Let's say your name and year. That way, when you look back a couple of years later, you will see how you've grown in your art over the years. So it's just good to date your pieces. And again, if that's if you're planning to continue doing this for a while and you want to see the progression of growth, I would say date your pieces. And guys, if you want to share your results, please do. We actually have a Facebook group called Watercolor Lovers by Artist Palette Durham region. Let me find you a link so it's easier, so you don't have to go browse around. You can take a photo. That's a group specifically dedicated to people like you and I who love watercolor and who are interested in, sharing our results along the way and growing together and learning together. So feel free to take a photo and share it in a group. We would love to see how they turned out. If you'd rather not and you're shy, or you have any other reasons why you would rather not, that's okay too. No pressure at all, but that is a good place. Here it is. Here's a link to the group. So that's a good place to share your results if you prefer to do that. And we love, love, love seeing your results. We love to see how it turned out for everyone, because that's something we'll look forward to in a virtual world where we can't really physically see what they turned out like. And guys, if you had fun and you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to say thank you by tipping me, you can do that as well. It's not an obligation. You don't have to, but I would really appreciate it, and I would never say no to that. And you can do it through PayPal. I'll post a PayPal link so you can use that. All right, I posted a PayPal tip and link if anyone is interested. And thank you guys in advance. Now, if you have any questions, ask away. I'll be happy to answer all of them for you, or at least what I can. Yes, Happy New Year, guys. Questions, questions, questions. You're welcome. Thanks for joining, guys. Yeah, if you have any suggestions, absolutely put them in chat. We'll check them out. We do have quite a few wave tutorials already, but we can always make one more. Waves are cool. Deb, great question about water. Watercolor is all about water. It is really about figuring out how much water to use and when. So generally, when you try to do the background, like those areas that we did at first, you want to use as much as possible. For the areas that you want to keep shape off and you don't want them to, flow, then you need to use medium amount of water. And for the small details such as branches and trees, less small amount of water. But really, those are just words. You really have to figure out what that actually looks like for you. And the only way to figure it out is experience. You just have to try. Keep trying. And the more you do this, you will figure out that practical amount of water that you need for the large areas, for everything to flow, the practical amount of water that you need for medium areas, for it to be light, but also keep the stroke, and practical amount of water for details that need to be nice and fine and also pigmented. So yes, a lot, less, little. But again, those are just words. You have to try it, try. I would even say it's a good exercise to take a piece of paper and just a small brush or medium brush, something with a pointed tip, and try just doing straight lines or wiggly lines or like a branches in a way with a different amount of water, and you will see how your brush will react to it. The more water you do, the easier it may be or the harder it may be. Depends how far you take it with water. But really, I would say try. Grab a piece of paper and try using different amount of water and see how your brush reacts to it and how your line spreads. But it is, honestly, that's all watercolor is about. It's figuring out water, how much water and where to apply it. Good. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this painting. All right, so then I'm gonna sign out. Thank you all for joining me. And if you're just joining now, or if you want to redo this later, as soon as I'm done this video, as soon as we're done this live, the video is gonna appear and you can start watching it from the beginning. And there will be a pause button too, which I know a lot of people prefer, because then you can just pause at any step and take your time for that particular step. So feel free to watch it anytime that you want. From the beginning, you will have all the time to do this. It's not going anywhere. So yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.